Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of GaudiumEtSpes22.com Podbean podcast and YouTube video. Been a while since I've done one of these. I've had to cancel a couple in the past week or so for various reasons. Those of you who listen to me or follow my blog know I've had to spend a considerable amount of time out in Nebraska dealing with my mother who has Alzheimer's. And those of you who deal with that problem with a relative, a loved one, knows how debilitating that can be. We're still trying to sell the farm. That's consumed my energies, my time. So I've been stretched. I was just talking to our guest today. I'll get to Kale in a second, but you guys all know Kale Zelden. We were just talking about feeling stretched and feeling kind of torn in a million different ways. So as I just said to Kale, well, I'm just going to live in the stretch.
That's right.
I gotta try and be creative with the stretch,
Right.
and not sit around feeling sorry for myself for not being able to do what I really want to do. All that being said, that's just a preamble. People need to, want to know, catch up what's going on with me. I've got three more podcasts next week. Eduardo Echeverria, Paul Seaton, one of the Rodney Hauser, probably. So we're going to go from there. Anyway, long time frequent guest on the show. Sometimes we alternate between my show and his
We do,
show.
yeah.
The one, the only, the man, myth, and legend, Kale Zelden. Kale
Larry,
Zelden.
Larry, it is great to be here as always. I'm feeling the stretch myself. I'm about to steer right into the winds and storms of the fall semester. But that's exciting for me, I have to admit, even though I know what it means. I know the quizzes and the tests and the papers that I'll have to grade, the readings that I'll have to prepare. But look, that's what I feel that God put me on the earth to do. So even though I know it's going to stretch me, I know that good things come to those who are faithful. So I'm going to do my best to be faithful to this vocation. And if this is going to be a busy fall, it's going to be a busy fall. So I'm gonna throw myself into the spirit there, and hopefully I will respond accordingly. So it's great to be back here with you as always.
Right.
Just real quick, I was at a conference this past weekend, and it's kind of like an interdenominational sort of thing. There are plenty of Protestants, plenty of Catholics, plenty of Orthodox, lay and religious all around. And I have to say, Larry, uh, more than a handful of times, people tugged me aside because they all want to talk to, they want to talk to you, which is always so humbling and awesome. I really enjoyed that part of the conference. But many people came to me and said, "Hey, Kale, we love when you and Larry get together and do your thing." And so I told them, I was like, well, on my way to the conference, I said, Larry, this is not a good week, but how about next week? So I was happy to report to them that we were going to jump right back into the saddle here on GaudiumEtSpes22.com and do what we do. So I'm super happy to be here, man.
Well, that's great. And I hear similar things in my email box and stuff. When are you and Kale going to do another
Yeah,
show? So
yeah,
that's always great to hear that kind of feedback for sure.
it
Well,
is.
okay. Oh, by the way,
Mhm.
from a former teacher to a current teacher, are you the kind
Mhm.
of teacher that actually lectures on your first day of class?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, oh, I would have
100%.
hated. Oh,
Oh yeah.
man.
Oh no, I dive right in, man. I tell them like, oh no. I mean, this is precious real estate, Larry. I have a finite amount of time that
I
I get to
know.
be in front of my kids. I got to jump in, man. Let's go. Let's do this.
I was notorious. My students loved me because they all knew. First day of class, back in the day before everything was online, I would hand
Right.
out a paper
Here's your
syllabus.
syllabus. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Had paper syllabus, often Xerox 2 minutes before the
Of
class
course.
started.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah, yeah.
run down to my secretary. Oh shit!
Da,
I'm
da, da,
quick.
da, da.
She go, oh, don't worry. Here they are. Pass them out, and I get like one third of the way through the thing, and I would look at the students and say, "Well, you can read the rest of it. Okay,
Right.
everybody, bye bye."
Yeah, yeah.
15 minutes in, but you, okay?
I can't, I'm a glutton, man. I want all of the time, right? All of the time. So I like to set tone. I like to kind of, set my edges and, want to
All
show
right.
them. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm tempted. Let's be clear, Larry. I mean, I'm tempted. Because those first couple of days, as you know, are a maelstrom of meetings and events and meets and greets and all that sort of stuff. But no, I like to dive right in because I can't help myself. I love talking about these things. So, that's what we do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one other reason why I would delay a lecture is that there's volatility in enrollment that first class,
Yeah, that's true. I don't get nearly as much of that like from on a high school level. I
Oh, that's
might lose
true. Yeah.
I might lose a kid because they flipped from Algebra 2 honors to regular or whatever. But no, no, I didn't have to deal with nearly the fluctuation that you had to deal with. So I get it.
Uh,
I get it.
all right. Well, okay. I thought I'd ask that question because
Yeah.
it popped into my head. But the topic of today, finally, all banter aside,
Yeah.
one of the things that has always fascinated me is the disenchantment thesis
Mhm.
of modern. I believe it was first floated by Max Weber, if I'm
Yeah.
correct. He, among others, perhaps.
Yeah, he sort of famously kind of coined it. It's a weird German name. I don't speak German myself, but it has been translated into English, Weber's thesis, as the disenchantment thesis. But what I have learned in the past, gosh, maybe year or so, that the word really is a kind of a remagicking. The word is more akin to
Yeah.
magic, which is still embedded in the word enchantment. If you think about it, like a chant or an enchantment is a kind of a spell. Maybe that sort of works. But I like to use the remagicking thesis or the dismagicking thesis. Maybe is
Well,
might be
that's
helpful for our conversation.
well, if for no other reason, because it leads into what I want to talk about.
Hmm.
Uh, it kind of focuses our attention. It decenters us because we've all heard the phrase over and over again. Those of us in academic circles,
Yeah,
the disenchantment thesis to the point where what does the word even mean anymore? So I agree with you. I wish I could remember the German word myself because I do read a little German, but I
yeah,
do remember exactly what you're saying, that it actually doesn't mean disenchantment in that English sense, which is a very kind of bloodless term, but the sort of demagicking
right.
and the desire to remagic things. It kind of shows Weber's sort of
It's a bias. It's a
it's a
bias.
bias, right? To characterize the classical religious worldview as a kind of realm of magic and spooky things,
Right.
and and not anything truly real, and so of course then you get books like what I think a very overrated book is Charles Taylor's A Secular Age,
Oh,
which is a
good. Let's talk about it. I love it. This is good because I'm very familiar with Taylor. Just real quick, I pulled up, by the magic of the god Google, I found the word, and I'm gonna probably butcher the German, but here we go. It's Entzauberung der Welt.
in Zauberung der Welt.
Entzauberung der Welt, and the
Yeah,
reenchantment is Wiederverzauberung. So anyway,
yeah.
how's that for nerdy podcasting
Well,
in its
you
fun?
and your German pronunciation has a strong English accent, but it's
I can't
basically
help it. I can't help it.
it's spot on, eh? It's spot
Spot
on.
on, right? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were just in Oxford. That's what I'm on about. All
That's right.
right.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
by the way, Oxford is great. I love Oxford. Anyway,
Ditto.
so I'll say this. I'm obviously I should be as intelligent and educated as Charles Taylor. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I read the book, and of course,
Yeah.
it has great merit in many
Yeah. Yeah.
places. My
Yeah.
When I say it's overrated in the sense that
Yeah. What do you mean?
well, he just sort of takes the disenchantment thesis kind of at face value. I mean, that it
Ah,
means, yes, we live in an immanent frame, we have buffered
right.
selves,
Right.
and it's secular. Uh,
Hmm.
he doesn't bless the secular or whatever, but there is a sense in my mind where you write this huge, massive book, and then you don't really reach any constructive conclusions at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah, he takes it as a given, right?
Yeah.
And that we're just secular and that's just it. Yeah, I hear you on that. Like you, I've worked my way through it and I've gone back to it on a number of occasions. I've even written about it a couple of times on my Substack.
N-
I find it a helpful book, but I think you're right. I think that there's a little bit too much. deference that is paid to the notion that we live in the immanent frame. And so what I would add, or maybe this is where you're going, I don't know, we've never talked about this, but what I would add is that the disenchanted frame is itself a kind of overlay of some deeper, more real reality. In other words, it's a sense of felt disenchantment, but in many respects, it's a if you could kind of imagine a pair of eyeglasses that instead of enhancing your vision, like you and I have to go to the eye doctor so that we can see really,
And
right?
we
Yeah,
have the same glasses, by the way.
exactly, exactly. But rather, it's a if you could think of the lenses as not enhancers, but as a kind of distorter, and even one might say a kind of radical shrinking of what we can see. So you could imagine split glasses, you could only see below, and all this stuff up here, which is there, you just can't see, and so therefore you conclude, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, like every good toddler.
Yeah, exactly. It almost seems to me tantamount to saying that we're stuck in an empirical frame of mind. We're
Right,
stuck in
right.
almost a logical positivist frame of
Right.
mind. Because
Kant. Yes, yes.
yeah, exactly. There is that great divide between the phenomenal and the noumenal,
Right.
and it can't be bridged because we live in the immanent. Now, this is an injustice somewhat to Charles Taylor because I have, in subsequent speeches and writings he's given,
Mhm.
he talks about all of these things.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, so let's get more specific here.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you look at, let's say, modernity,
Yep.
say over the past 400 years, since the
Yeah.
rise of the scientific revolution, followed by the Enlightenment, all of the things that created the modern Western mentality with its
Mhm.
rejection of spooky things
Yeah.
in favor of things that we can test. Uh, what do you how do you define our culture therefore? Do you think that we live in an unmagicked world, in a disenchanted world? Uh, I think we do, uh, with some caveats.
Right. I would add a caveat to that. I think that the supernatural is real, uh,
Yes.
period, full stop, right? So that um, our inability to see it, feel it, is a result of our conditioning more so than anything else. And so, if you scratch, the surface of like, I don't know, the New York Times or, CBS News, yeah, we live in an imminent frame, right?
Yeah.
That the supernatural doesn't exist because it doesn't get reported on. But I think you and I both know if you steer your car off of the main drag, if you steer your car off of the 95 and hit some of those blue roads on the map, you recognize really quickly that um, normal people, rank and file people suffer under no such delusion. They just simply have way too much experience with things that they can't explain, nor can a modern scientist with modern equipment can see either. And so, what I would say to those who believe in the imminent frame, interrogate that a little bit. Talk to some people who don't show up in the faculty room or the coffee station at the New York Times or what have you. I think that, when you talk to normal people, you are going to be inundated with stories of the inexplainable. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I think that more people are capable of sensing the dark side of enchantment more so than the light side. I can, even some of my friends
Yes.
who struggle with their faith, what they don't struggle with is the reality of like evil and dark spirits. Like that's pretty clear to them.
Yeah.
So I would say that tells me that there's something for which the tools of the modern imagination are incapable of rendering.
Yeah, that's interesting. It has to do, I think, a lot with amongst the educated elites
Hmm.
and the powerful people of our society. I don't know what their motivation is. I don't know what their end game is. But
Well,
go ahead.
I was just, well, I mean, it pays. I mean, it pays. It's
Yeah.
good. It's good for business.
Yeah, to keep people in a cast of mind that I would go, I think it's even more nefarious than that. If you can
Mhm.
keep people's mind simply focused on penultimate things, on the
Hmm.
immediacy, on the here and now, get them to focus on that, focus on that, focus on that, then
Hmm.
their sixth sense. I mean, I just saw an interesting lecture the other day from a neuroscientist who said we actually have like 34 senses
Right.
and
Right.
not five senses. And
Right.
yeah, and she was actually a believer, a believing
Yeah.
neuroscientist. Very, I wish I could remember her name, Tara something. But anyway,
Yeah.
uh, she was going on and on and on about modernity creates this limitation to the five senses, which then eliminates our ability to utilize all of these other senses. It truncates our vision.
Hmm.
But all it takes, and this is why I don't think things are as bad as it, and she points this out. All it takes is for us to divert our attention from the penultimate to the more ultimate. In an instant, your eyes can be open. You can be like red pilled, and your eyes get opened.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
reminded of a poem by Goethe,
mhm.
and he says, das Glück, happiness, luck, serendipity. Das Glück ist wie ein Schmetterling. It's like a butterfly. Der,
Mhm.
wer, man danach jagt, the more you chase it, weicht es einem aus. It eludes you. Aber das Glück ist wie ein Schmetterling. Je mehr man danach jagt, desto mehr weicht es einem aus. Wenn man sich aber anderen Dingen zuwendet, senkt sich soft off die Schulter. In other words, if you
Oh,
turn your attention to other things, then it will come and set on your shoulder. Pardon
right.
my halting German, but Goethe was talking about those other senses. That's what he was talking. He was anti-Newtonian in this sense.
Right.
Okay,
Interesting. Interesting.
and he was talking about all you have to do is look. If you
Mhm.
pursue it, you won't find it. If you divert, and then it will come and sit on your shoulder.
And
And
boy, we have that experience all the time, don't we, Larry? That sense
yeah.
that, think of the microscope, right? The power of the microscope is that it is a radical shrinking down of the aperture of phenomena into this sort of this micro, you know, pathway magnifies that the micro. And so you would be absurd, right? If let's say that you were looking at I don't know, a skin, a piece of a few cells of skin material on a dish or on one of those plates, right? You know, it would be laughable to suggest that the only thing that exists is this tiny little thing that I have blown up, in the viewfinder. Clearly things exist outside of that pinhole. And yet, if you kind of follow the metaphor, that obviously there's plenty that exists outside of what the microscope sees.
Oh, so true. So true that we just see this tunnel visioned narrow thing. And I think that this narrowing of our vision, which I ascribe to the results of the fall, I think one of the most underestimated doctrines of the church these days is the doctrine of the fall. And I think it's not emphasized enough because there's a feeling that it's
Yeah, yeah,
dissonant
yeah,
with modern
yeah,
evolutionary
yeah,
theory.
yeah.
How do we seem more like ascending apes than descending
Right,
angels? And
right,
so,
right, right.
there's all that. Okay, so we have to talk about that. But I think, as Chesterton said, there's no greater evidence if you believe in the good and in this
Mhm.
Platonic sense that we are fallen, then this fixation we have on penultimate things, as I like to say, and so that truncation of our religious sense has now created a situation in our culture, and this is where I think the disenchantment thesis is correct, where I think the religious sense is like any other sense, or even a muscle in your body. If you don't use it, and
Yeah.
as you said, if it's layered over, if it's encrusted over, and if then our cultural elites engage in a deliberate disinformation campaign to convince us that it's all just a bunch of BS. It's just the spaghetti monster,
Right, right.
the flying spaghetti monster, Richard
Yeah,
Dawkins and stuff. That
yeah,
kind of ridicule, that has an effect on us, doesn't it?
yeah. Of course it does, right? And I think that um, not only does it have an effect upon us, but I think the proper way to think of it is a kind of possession or obsession. It's interesting to me that those words are linked with just different prefixes, right? But when somebody is obsessed with something, it has a way of shutting everything else out.
Yes.
Right. So now you can be obsessed with a lot of things. You can be obsessed with a girl. You can be obsessed with a sport. You can be obsessed with an idea. Consequently, or as you know, Dostoevsky believed that the great form of modern possession, that is possession in the what Taylor would call, what we're calling the eminent frame, the primary mechanism by which we become obsessed or possessed is through ideas, right? So that ideas serve this kind of function that a medieval might say is a kind of demon or a spirit of some sort that robs you of some large sense of personal agency, right? So if you could think about the person that is obsessed with Taylor Swift or something like that, is that everything else gets tuned out, and so the only thing that exists is Taylor Swift and what she's doing and what she's not doing and her latest album, and nothing else kind of matters, right? Well, that is a radical shrinking of your visual and imaginal horizon, right? So that to be obsessed is to be enchanted by something we might say falls outside of the proper order of being.
Yes, absolutely. And boy, I couldn't have said that I couldn't have said that better myself. That they're outside of the regular order of being. The essence of the demonic. Let's go back to this.
Yeah, yeah,
The word diabolical,
right,
diabole, literally means to throw apart,
right.
to
Shh.
to disintegrate, to
Mm,
take what was whole and dissolve it and cast it apart. Uh, uh, so the diabolical is to destroy things,
right,
pull them apart. And I think the essence of modern science, with its belief that one gets to reality via dissection, via
yes,
reduction, via
right,
taking the organism and reducing it to constituent parts,
right.
is inherently diabolical. Now, not in the sense
Yeah,
that
right, right, right.
science
Good. You didn't,
is
yeah,
bad, or
right.
to do that is bad. What I mean is that when you construct an entire epistemology, when you
Hmm.
construct an entire immanent frame and an entire worldview and an entire culture on the spirit of dissent, that's why Lewis opposed vivisection,
Right,
not simply because he was in favor of animal rights, but because he said
right,
the same thing. You cannot get at reality via dissection, not
right.
in that organismic whole. It has its place,
Of
but if it
course.
is all encompassing, then you've got a culture that is rooted in dissection, in the diabolos.
Right. And the problem, of course, is that the diabolic, in the way that we're talking about it right here, we
Yeah.
can talk about the diabolic, in a specifically religious sense in a minute if we want, but the diabolic is fundamentally the thing we do when we analyze. Right now, a good analyst, right? Let's say you go to the doctor and you say, I got a little bit of this and I got the and right. A good an analyst will take those facts and what does he do? What does a good analyst do? What does a good doctor do? He stitches together a kind of fact pattern, meaning, oh, that's what this means. The problem is that we are way more comfortable. It seems to me we are way more comfortable in the process of analysis with very little sense that we actually need to take the knowledge gained from analysis and bring it back to somehow bear upon the whole, right? And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
the antithesis to the diabolic is the symbolic, right? Is the symbolic, which is the
Yes.
forging back together, right?
With his Jonathan Pagot's whole thing.
Pajot, yeah.
Peugeot. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Peugeot.
yeah,
I'm good at speaking German, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
not
French.
so
Yeah,
much,
yeah, yeah.
not so much French. Peugeot. This is so. I mean, I watch his podcast, religiously. Pardon the
Top
pun.
notch. Yeah, the top notch,
Top
guys.
notch.
Watch your Peugeot. He's very much worth it.
Because this is what he's on about. And, to
Right.
toot Pope Francis' horn just a little bit, he
Mhm,
had a document on the liturgy a couple years ago where he talked
mhm.
about the problem with why people don't appreciate liturgy anymore. Is people don't appreciate, they don't appreciate at all the realm of the symbolic.
Right, right.
They do, but they don't.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, it's just that we have weird symbols. We
Yeah,
have different symbols, and the most powerful symbols are the ones then that enchant to brings back here. But before I go down that road, I want to come back to your discussion. I took it a little bit off kilter.
no, it's okay.
Your discussion of the demonic as a kind of obsession
Mhm.
that then limits our vision. I went into the diabolic because I do believe those two ideas are related.
They're
That when
twinned.
we
Yeah.
when we live in a world of dissection,
Hmm.
instead of seeing das Ganze im Fragment, the whole in the part, we
Hmm.
don't see das Ganze im Fragment. We simply see das Fragment, and we can then focus on that fragment. That which is now disintegrated no longer captures us on the level of the symbolic. So then it becomes an obsessional fixation. We fixate on one. It's like I like say, you could be listening to the most fascinating speaker in the world, and if there's a fly on his nose that he doesn't know, you
It's
just
over.
you
Yeah, yeah.
spend your whole time looking like, why doesn't he know there's that damn fly on his nose?
That's right. That's
Can't he
right.
feel that fly on his nose? Holy crap,
Right.
what the hell?
Right.
And so that's kind of this, that's a strange human psychological trait
Mm.
where we're going to fixate on the anomalous or the singular that's kind of idiosyncratic and unrelated to anything connected. And so there is a demonic, I think, deception in the religious sense of demonic
Okay.
deception, and that takes the form of obsession. So I don't think our problem today is possession, although many exorcists might disagree with me, as it is obsession. And
Yeah.
our obsessions take the form of video games and pornography,
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever. I'm thinking of all the sort of media ways now where people are just so into their phones and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Right. So I think that tracks with sort of the way I'm seeing things. You know, the like it takes somebody who's possessed, right? Or even obsessed. It kind of in this way, it doesn't really matter. We can all see that, Jim, who's like bouncing around on the corner and he's not well. We can very clearly see that Jim is not well, right? Uh,
Yeah.
right. And because, let's say that Jim's obsession is heroin, or fentanyl or whatever is, part of the modern spell casting that we subject ourselves to. Like we can all see it very, very clearly that Jim is not well, and in part because Jim has prioritized, the high of fentanyl, and what the fentanyl does, which basically is an invitation into obliteration, an invitation into oblivion, right? We can all see it. Okay. So if we can see it at the local, hyper particular level of the person, why can't we see it, sort of drawing back the aperture, so to speak, as we, going wide and high? Why are we unable to see that we, as a, let's say, a culture, the culture that you and I partake in, both at the sort of the level of your city or town, or your county, but also the culture that you and I participate as, Americans, let's say, or Catholics in America. We can kind of play all these different frames, right? They all overlap and interwork with one another. Why is it that maybe perhaps not the two of us, but why is it that we have a hard time saying that we are obsessed as a culture, right? And so in other words, we're not, the obsessed person is not flourishing. The obsessed person is not a well-ordered person. The obsessed person is on a direct flight path into the side of a mountain, right? but we get really queasy on that kind of next level or two up, and we say, well, I don't know, it's not that bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because gosh, I could talk about so many things with because I think that's a brilliant insight that we instinctively recognize when we see like you just go there neighborhoods in Philadelphia that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You walk down the streets now where you just see people all slumped over
Right.
because they're drug addicted, addled, they're
Yeah.
fentanyl or whatever the latest drug
Mhm.
is, and it's very clear. And you feel like, oh, those poor people. You sense the diabolos, you sense the disintegration.
Right.
And I always remind myself when I see such people, uh, that at one time was somebody's little boy,
Right. Right.
somebody's little
Right.
girl.
Right.
At one time, that was a hole. At one time, this
Right.
was a child filled with the promise of all of
Mhm.
life, a condensed symbol of all of our hopes and dreams, eschatologically, even for the future, condensed into a child. And then as it grows up, disintegration, and it's
Yeah.
before you. Why can't we see that same phenomena then on a macro scale as
Right.
we look out at our culture?
Right.
In fact, and there is, and therefore what I'm alluding to, and I hope you are too, that
Hmm.
there is a cultural level of this obsession that we're talking about, and
Hmm.
part of it is simply subconscious and just part of the
Yeah.
natural evolution and flow of the latent metaphysics of ideas that we've accepted antecedently. Some of it's
Mm.
more deliberate. Some of it is a decided effort, as I keep saying, by our elites to keep us into a certain blue pill state of blissful ignorance. But I do think that there is a sense in which our culture is deranged
Hmm.
and diabolical.
Well,
And
and it
I
almost,
don't
it
want to.
all,
Let me
I was
finish.
just going to say, yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
finish up,
Oh,
finish up.
no, I was just going to bring up, like, for example, transgenderism, which is
Yeah.
clearly
Yeah.
insane. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
clearly a
Yeah.
level of psychosis. I mean, in
Right.
terms of our cultural acceptance of us, borders on a disassociation from reality. And to keep insisting on it and insisting on it, like the shooter at the Annunciation Church yesterday. I still see newspaper articles, even Fox News, referring
Hmm.
to him as her,
Right.
she, because
Or,
what we don't
or,
want,
or, or in that vein that, they do this, like, it's kind of funny. It's sort of like modern philosophy, where well, let's just bracket off this thing and let's just talk about mental health. And you're like, I'm sorry.
yeah,
You're just going to bracket off this, like, I don't know, kind of seems important. This young boy seems to think that he's really a girl. Like, again, I don't want to be cruel or unkind, but I mean, good Lord, Larry, like where are we
yeah,
when that then that can pass off as something we can just bracket off us to the side, and like, man, we don't know what a motive is. We can't seem to see anything. It's like, you're participating in a spell, right?
yeah.
You're participating in this group casted spell in which we, like, there's nothing to see here. No, no, you can't notice that, right, Larry?
That's exactly what I'm getting at here, that this is a kind of enchantment. Look, gender dysphoria, which is what I prefer to call it, because it
Yeah.
is a mental illness where you think you're in the wrong body, which is clearly
Mhm.
nuts. I mean, and we see people now that say, "Well, I identify as a cat, so please put
Sure.
a litter box in my bedroom for me." And we clearly see, well, those people are nuts. But the gender stuff is fine. The fact of the matter is that gender dysphoria has always been with us.
Of
I mean,
course.
years and years ago as a child, I remember seeing in the grocery store a man with a beard
Yeah.
dressed as a
Yeah.
woman
Yeah. Yeah.
prancing around, and my dad had to explain to me what the hell that was.
Right. Yeah.
But
Well,
my
I
dad,
look, I grew up adjacent to New Orleans, so
yeah, there
I
you go.
saw all kinds of things where I was like, oh, okay, well, they're just special, and we were
Yeah,
very, like,
yeah.
kind of kind about it and, like, whatever, but we didn't indulge it beyond the level of, like, but it was just, yeah, it was a fact of life, right, rather than a
Exactly.
defining.
So the point, though, is we've taken something that was always recognized, and some people reacted to it harshly. Some people,
Yeah.
just like you said, oh, well, to each his own. Uh, the fact is now we've taken it and fetishized it, and we've
Right.
turned it into an enchantment. And this whole LGBTQ and then focusing on the T
Mhm.
ideology has become a quasi-religion that constitutes a kind of enchantment that is also at one and the same time a form of collective insanity.
Yeah,
And that's the problem that I see with the disenchantment thesis taken simply as a divide between the religious and the secular without taking into consideration that that divide is impossible in a sense because we do have a religious sense. There is not ever going to be an a-religious human being. And
correct.
therefore, it's not a question of are we going to be religious or non-religious, but the quality of the religion, or to use a different word, the quality of the enchantment, the quality of our magic is
Right.
what matters here. And that's what you and I
Amen.
are questioning. What is the quality of our cultural magic?
Right.
And and how much is it harmed? Some people might say, "Oh, you guys are harping on like academics that, what's this got to do with the smell of a fart or how much eggs cost?"
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
I just use it because
I love it. No, it's good. Go, go,
you know,
go.
I once had a philosophy professor prove to us metaphysical realism, epistemological realism, by working up a good flatulence in class one day and just letting one rip.
That's funny.
And he goes, "Now, if you can smell that, I've just proved to you, epistemological realism." But
That's so good.
obviously, obviously, he knew that that wasn't true. But it was
Right.
a shtick that he had in
Yeah, yeah, of
class that
course.
was
Of
funny.
course.
So that's why I use it. But the fact is that well, anyway, I'm rambling now. So
Well,
go ahead.
I want to isolate what you said there. You know, you said that it's not so much a question of enchantment or disenchantment, but rather which enchantment you participate in. And I think that's a really important thing. And it might scare you a little bit to hear that. Not you, Larry, but any of you glorious people in the audience. And thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time and attention, Larry. Do our best not to bore you or waste your time, but you might think that's scary. Well, I want to remind my religious brothers and sisters that we believe in the Holy Spirit, we believe in the Trinity, we believe in the supernatural reality of the God come down to become man and crucify and die and rise from the dead, right? So that might run a little bit rough over your modernist ears, but I'm here to tell you that if you call yourself a Christian, you are participating in the ultimate enchantment. And I think it's important that we hear that. We participate in a group enchantment that orders all the way up to God Himself. Right. So you need to hear that. So the great lie of modernity might be something along these lines, Larry. See how you feel here, that the great lie of modernity is allowing you to pretend that you can exempt yourself from the metaphysical reality of being.
Bingo. Amen. That you can exempt yourself from the metaphysical reality of being, that you can hide from it.
Right,
You can cloud it over or whatever, but it's impossible. I mean, there's the
right,
hound of heaven, the
right,
idea of the hound of heaven, and it's going to get you. It's going to get you, and whether you want it to or not. And the quality of the enchantment, the quality of the magic is really what's going to matter. Kind of as you were talking, I had a thought related to what you were saying pop into my head, and now it's gone. But
well,
I
invariably it will come back, right? But
well,
so
I
so
know what it is.
yeah,
That
go ahead.
one of the signs of the modern world that doesn't get talked about enough, and I think it's a horrible malaise that afflicts us insofar as we no longer have good enchantments, that
Mhm.
we have lesser enchantments, is that the lesser enchantments related more to the sensual realm rather
Mhm.
than to the spiritual realm
Mhm.
bore. They're boring. You get jaded to them.
Yeah,
And thus there is, as George Bonanno says in the Diary of a Country Priest, written in 1936, the
yeah.
young curé of Abricot begins the novel by saying, because it's really his diary, "My parish is bored. My
Oh
parish is
man.
bored." He goes, that's how the novel begins. My
Yeah.
parish is bored. Like all the rest, he says, like all the rest.
Mm. Mm.
he seeps into you like, mist from, drizzle in the rain that you just can't escape. And here's the key line. He goes, "We recognize this, and yet there's not a thing we can do about it.
Oh man.
There's not
Gutting,
a thing we can do about it." And
gutting,
then,
gutting.
but then the entire rest of the novel is about the quiet sanctity of this misunderstood. This little priest was misunderstood as an alcoholic. He actually had stomach cancer, didn't know it, and drinking a lot
Mm.
of wine for whatever
To, to,
reason made his
to calm
stomach
it.
felt better. And so his parishioners thought he was a drunk. They thought he was a simpleton, an intellectual dullard, and yet he was deeply, deeply holy. And the novel ends. He dies in the home of an ex-priest friend who cannot give him the last rites.
Mm.
And the young curé says to his friend, "Does it matter? Grace is all.
Mm.
Does it
Wow.
matter? Grace
So
is
powerful.
all." Sometimes mistranslated into English as "grace is everywhere." That's not the correct French
Mm.
translate. It's "grace is all." So my point in related is that the entire book written, Bernanos himself was an Angstmensch.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
someone riddled
yeah,
with
yeah,
ennui and
yeah.
boredom, existential boredom, and all these things, and so was a great adept at writing about this. Now, it might seem like this is off topic, but it isn't,
Mm.
because I think the diabolus, where everything gets dissected, where everything's reductive, where then we focus on that existential fly on the nose and become obsessed with these little distractions that then dull our religious sense, ultimately leads to a level of unbelievable frustration in the form of boredom, which
Yeah.
then
Oh,
becomes very, I think there are few things in life more destructive
diabolical than boredom.
than boredom. There's
So,
a, what's the
so as
spiritual word? Acedia? Is that
acedia,
how?
acedia,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I always pronounce it acedia. So, okay, so this is a great. You know me, like I'm gonna go. Where do I always go with you? For some reason, you're like my Dante guy, right? Dante has, look, almost in every respect, the problem with all the souls that are in hell, number one, they chose it. Number two, none of them can see. None of them can look and see the highest thing, right? For by virtue of the choices that they have made, real choices, real free will to make these choices, they are unable to see properly, right? And so they're distracted, or they're obsessed, or they're any number of different things, right? So you can kind of read that as a metaphor of what we're talking about here. But the whole time when you're walking through hell with Virgil, what are you looking forward to? You're looking forward to seeing Satan. Of course, that's what you're looking forward to see. And what happens when you get to the very belly
Who,
of
who wouldn't?
of
Who wouldn't be looking for
right,
Satan?
right,
Yeah.
right. And so what you finally see at the very bottom, at the very center of hell, is it's not flames, it's not dramatic. It is the ice cold Satan lazily flapping his wings. And it reminds me of that Wilfred Owen poem, Dulce et Decorum Est, when he calls it, the devil who is sick of sin. Like he's just disgusted, total and complete enervation of the spirit, because the spirit, of course, is meant to apprehend and to
Right.
contemplate and to behold the beatific vision, right? But they have disallowed themselves through their choices to look up to the highest good, right? And so there is Satan, and it's a total letdown. Right, you're walking down there, you're like, oh man, this stuff is great. I can't wait, at least I get to see the big bad guy. And the big bad guy is crying, sad, like not sobbing, but just crying. And he's beating his wings, and the cold wind of his barely flapping wings have fanned it into ice. And so he is encased in the frozen tears of his own making, and he can barely, this level of velleity, this level of I can barely muster any energy at all. And that's the figure of Satan, the
Oh
very
yeah.
incarnation of sin, right? Of split, of tearing apart. Right. And so, sort of to get back to what we're talking about here, it's that it's in many respects, it's because Satan refuses to see fully. His envy and pride get in the way of him seeing, the right order of being, we might say, something along those lines.
Yeah. It's a terrifying thought,
Oh,
actually.
yeah.
It's a
Terrifying.
terrifying thought. And by the way, beautiful description of Dante.
Mm,
Those
mm.
people who are interested in Kale Zelden's take on Dante should sign up for his Dante
Yes.
course.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't mean to do a commercial, but yes,
No,
I am.
but do a commercial real quick.
Yeah.
Give a
So real
plug.
quick, I'm doing a six-part series on Dante's Inferno. I'm calling it the Let's Go to Hell, and we are going to work our way together in live streams here on the magic of the interweb, and it'll start a week after Labor Day. And so we're going to get together, we're going to do it, and I'm going to be your Virgil as we walk through. Just a quick caveat, I am not a Dante scholar. I'm just a seasoned reader and teacher of Dante. And I find that a lot of people want to get into these old classic books because there's so much richness, so much depth, so much wisdom, so much excitement, but it's a little bit hard to pick up after you've done your thing, you've lived your life, you've been a professional, and maybe you want to kind of go back to some of these things that you haven't got. So
Oh,
join
please
me.
do.
You can find my link. It's in my bio on X, so you can go there and check it out. It's
And
fantastic.
everyone should, because I
Yeah,
think you're, like you said, whenever you're on my show, we always end up talking about Dante, which is
yeah, it's
great because
amazing. Yeah, it's
I
amazing.
love Dante. Little
Yeah.
side note, I once was in Rome with my students from DeSales, and we were traveling
Mhm.
up Viale Trastevere, the main road in Trastevere, on a
Yeah,
tram,
that's
and
where I lived.
we went past, so did I, went past Dante's house. You know where Dante's house
I
there
do.
is in
Yeah,
Rome.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
turned to one of my students that was on the tram, and I said to him, he's a good student, smart kid, theology major.
Yeah.
And I turned and said, do you know that was one of Dante's residences at one time? He
Mm.
actually stayed there. And this kid turned to me and said, "Who's Dante?"
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
You,
So there's a
yeah,
need. So there's a
yeah.
need,
I
folks.
pulled
Yeah.
a dagger out of my
Yeah,
heart. Like,
exactly, exactly.
who's Dante? But
Yeah.
that's like saying who's Galileo?
Right.
Who's you know for
Yeah.
crying out who's Christopher Columbus? For
Yeah.
crying out loud.
Yeah.
But anyway, back
So
to
you were
the
talking about Bernanos. You were talking about the priest
boredom
who's sort of
and
sick
boredom
of sin through boredom.
and acedia. And I think this is one of the results of the disenchantment that we feel, or the poor enchantments that we have. People are bored. And yet, okay, so this people try to figure me out in terms of my Catholic theology, my
Mm.
ecclesiology. Where do I stand on the spectrum of traditionalism? I'm on the
Yeah.
spectrum. I'm on the spectrum.
We're on the
Tradition
spectrum, brother. Yeah.
traditionalism to progressivism. I am not a progressive. I'm not a traditionalist. I'm not a neocon. I'm not a conservative in that boring sense.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
some version of a communio ressourcement theologian and a Catholic worker devotee of Dorothy Day. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because it gets to the essence then of the primary motivation behind my various critiques of the modern church, that the besetting sin of the modern church is that it is boring,
yeah.
it is banal, and
Yep.
it takes what should be transcendent and beautiful and part of the organismic whole, the symbolon, the symbolic. And there is a spirit of dissection
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the liturgical reform, in so much of our emphasis on social justice. And we needed a liturgical reform. Whether or not the one we got is great or not, we'll debate that. All right.
Yes, we
And I,
will.
I'm a Catholic worker. I believe in
Yeah.
social justice. But the way those things are cast in very prosaic ways, in
Mhm.
very scientific, secular ways, uh, is ultimately ends in a dissolution of the form of Christ as the animating soul of the church, is that towards
Mm.
which we have such a rich monastic tradition, such a rich mystical tradition. This is what people are thirsting after. This is the enchantment they seek. And we give them instead absolute gruel,
Right.
absolutely clean. And then we
Right.
wonder why. Why are we hemorrhaging
Mhm.
people out the door? Oh, it's because of we don't support gay marriage and we don't support women's ordination. Oh, Protestants support all that
Right.
junk.
Right.
And yet they got people hemorrhaging even
Yeah.
worse than we do.
Yeah.
And that's
How's that
because
working
they're
out?
even
Yeah.
more boring. They're even more banal. They're even more disenchanted or have bad enchantments. That's my problem. I have a huge pastoral critique. We are to read the signs of the times, and we are reading them wrongly.
Yeah. Amen. Three amens on that because the remember Larry, that the obverse side of boredom is restlessness. So if you look at acedia, acedia can take on forms, right? Outward expressions of an inner reality, we might even be tempted to say. And so oftentimes we think of boredom as a kind of malaise, a kind of indolence, which is true. We do see that. But the flip side of that is an obsessive restlessness, a kind of go, 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 go. And so both of those are mechanisms by which we are distracted from the ultimate and proper use of our intellect, which is contemplation of God. And it is that. And so, how do we get there, Larry? How do we get out of the indolence of boredom and the restlessness of, go, go, go get them? I mean, how do we do that?
Oh, it's not as simple as simply, well,
Right, right. Yeah. It's
you
not a
know,
trick question. I'm just,
one of my point is it's not as simple as we just need to return to the traditional Latin mass
mhm, mhm.
and women wearing headdress and so on and so. Okay, I'm not opposed to any of that. I think the Latin mass is beautiful and so forth. But anyone that believes that there's an inherent remystifying, remagicking, reenchantment of the church by simply reintroducing more Latin and more Gregorian chant, as wonderful as those things are, I think are fooling themselves.
Okay.
Because even amongst the Orthodox that have beautiful liturgy and so
Yeah.
on, they're hemorrhaging people too.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
So,
maybe
so it, so
so
it
so
seems
it's a
so.
problem.
Right. So it seems to me that even if the outward forms, which are real and good, no arguments between us on that,
No,
even
none.
those even those outward forms not having the kind of proper regenerative effect of a participatory liturgy would be means that it's not just in the object of the sort of the choreographed dance, we might say, and as important as the choreographed dance is, so there's something about the modern subject, and you and I are not
Oh,
exempt from this, right? Yeah, go
this
ahead.
is so true. I've written on this before. There's a great movie with Peter Sellers in it from like 50 years ago called Being There, where he's just this simpleton who gets confused with being this profound person. All right. And so it gets interviewed, and the interviewer asks, "What do you really like to do?" And he loves to watch television. So,
Yeah, 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 of course.
and he goes, "I like to watch." He just says, "I like to
I like to
watch.
watch.
I
Yeah.
like to watch." And what the essence of this point in the, of course, that gets misunderstood, but the essence
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
point in
yeah,
the
yeah.
movie is that one of the other offshoots of the spirit of diabolos and dissection is detachment.
Yes,
And
yes.
we've all become moviegoers. We've
Yeah.
all become watchers.
Which
We've
is what
all
that novel is about, by the way. But go, keep going.
exactly Walker Percy. Okay,
Yeah,
so what does that do? That sense of I like to watch, detachment, observation means that as you seek reenchantment, you can seek it in ways that are kind of cosplaying,
yes.
simply a kind of role playing
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I still am a watcher. I'll go to the Latin Mass because
Okay.
I think that will help me reenchant, but I'm there almost purposefully as a kind of role playing that I'm doing here.
Yeah,
And so the answer to, and I'm not priest. I'm not criticizing the Latin
yeah,
Mass. I'm just using this as an example of why it's not so simple to simply return to these traditional things. You have to overcome the cosplaying. You have
yeah,
to overcome this dissection that leads to detachment, that leads to I like to watch only,
yeah.
and never. So we have to do things as a church that invest people in things
Right.
that get them. This is why I am such a huge advocate of study abroad for college
Right.
students. It
Right.
decenters you.
Right. Why does that work, Larry? Because we look, it worked on me, it worked on you. What is it about taking me out of like whatever, Rhode Island, where I am,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, what is it about dumping, 19-year-old Kale from some random place in the United States of America and plunking him down in a meaningful experience in Rome? Like, why does that work?
That's a
Right.
good question. I think part of it is it decenters us.
Yeah.
When anytime you're taken out of your comfort zone, your environment, and you're placed in something different, foreign,
Yeah.
alien, it decenters you in a good way. Because then you have to step back and stop relying upon all of the psychological and emotional tools that you in
Short
your toolbox.
and
Uh,
shortcuts, mental
right.
shortcuts, which are
And
real.
then you
Keep
have
going.
to, if you're going to survive the experience, you have to invest yourself.
Did you
Right.
do it? My guy did. So the guy who led my trip, what he did is on the first day, we get this is a great story. So sorry for the
Oh,
interruption,
go,
but
no, go, go,
so,
go.
so we get there and we're staying at a little boarding house attached to a convent in Trastevere. And so you take the red eye, right? And you get there, whatever, 8 o'clock in the morning, let's say. And you got your bags and your backpack and the whole thing, and they take us to they drop us off on the outskirts of Trastevere because the buses can't get there, right? You have to walk, right? So got all
Yeah.
of our stuff and we're like walking up the hill to the boarding house at the convent, and we're
Oh, was
blitzed.
it
We're
was it on the Geniculum?
it was on Via Garibaldi. It was
Yeah, okay.
at the time it was called Montessori, no, Monasterio de Sette de Gloria, Our Mother of the
Yeah.
Seven Sorrows. So anyway,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay.
yeah, it's great. It's a great place, right? So anyway, so we get there and we go to the place. We're brought up to our rooms and we separate. And it's like, come down in 10 minutes. And we're like, oh, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. Because you're dying, right? Even as a kid, you're dying because you don't sleep on a plane. Nobody sleeps on a plane, really. So anyway, so he brings us down there and then we walk we're walking. I don't know where I'm walking. I don't know where I'm walking. We're walking. We're kind of going through these winding little streets, and we hit the side of the columned arms of the Piazza des St. Peter's, right? St. Peter's. And we walk in there. So it's completely this disorienting experience. You're kind of walking through the streets and everything's cool and new. And you're just sort of out. And all of a sudden it opens up to the huge piazza. Right, and you're just like, whoa! And then they walked us right up to the church. We walk in, and you know what the experience of like is going into one of those cathedrals. You walk in, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you look up, and your stomach just falls out. And you're like, whoa! Right, and
Yeah.
so it worked, right? So you can think of it as almost like a kind of educational technology that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
taking your enervated state, you're weary, you're tired, but all of a sudden so all of those normal defenses that I would have built up if I'm fully fed, fully slept, and all
Yeah.
those sort of things, and all of
Exactly.
a sudden, boom. And like the rest of my time there, the 3.5, 4 months that I was there, it's like that experience just happening over and over again.
And that's a grandiose experience of beauty,
Yeah.
unexpected
Time,
beauty, and so
time.
on. But it's also just the minutia of negotiating things like where do I buy a biletto,
Right,
where do
right.
I get a bus ticket?
Right.
And it's intimidating. Like, well, okay, where am I supposed to go to get one of these bus
Yeah.
tickets?
What's a lira? I don't know what a lira. It looks like Monopoly money to me.
Well,
I don't know, right?
now it's a
That's a euro.
euro,
I know, I know.
but
That's how old I am, Larry. That's how old I am. So
well, it's like when I went to Poland. I got
yeah.
off the plane in Krakow, and my $1 bought 10,000 zloty or something like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm rich. I'm rich.
Right, right.
But then I went to buy a bottled water, and it was
Yeah.
15,000
Right.
zloty. And it's like,
Right, right.
okay, I see. But
Yeah.
this is my point about decentering. All stories aside, it
Yeah.
decenters you psychologically, and it invests you in something. I interviewed on here a very great priest, Father Clinton Sensat, and his specialty is doing pilgrimages.
I was
Uh,
just gonna say pilgrimage. I was just gonna say it.
but
Good,
I
good.
think the lost art of the pilgrimage is
Yeah.
another way that the church can help people get invested
Yeah.
in. That's the key, not cosplaying that
Right.
religion. It's good for the kids, or I'm doing
Mm,
something that I think is good for me in a kind
mm,
of
mm.
way that I'm simply acting out, but not really believing. You have to you have to invest in something that's going to cost you.
Yes.
There is no
Yes.
redemption without cost.
Right.
This
Right.
is This seems to
This
be
is
a
good.
spiritual law. It seems to be a
Yeah.
spiritual law enacted by God, rooted in the divine nature, that there can't be real freedom, real love, real redemption without cost. And
Right.
that means investment.
Yeah. So think about this. Like, why do we fast? Right? Why do we prepare ourselves in Advent and Lent? Right? Well, in part, there's a kind of breaking down of the normal, right? Our normal routines, right? And and so as to prepare ourselves to experience that which in our normal day-to-day busy lives we're incapable of seeing. So then, what if, Larry, we've created a world that is optimized toward calorie fulfillment. It's optimized toward comfort fulfillment. It's optimized to all of these things that we like, and I like them too, Larry. You and I both like our yum yums, right? But what if what
Yeah.
what if that comes at a cost? And what if that cost is the inability to see the face of God and to hear his voice? And I think modernity is that.
That's exactly right. We have purchased, we have traded a heavy stone of gold for a little tiny fragment
Right.
of coal. We've
Right.
gradually traded it down and traded it down and
Well,
traded
that's
it.
good.
Well,
That's really right.
Joseph Ratzinger begins Introduction to Christianity with the story. I think it's the story of Lucky Jack or something or other, where
So great.
he begins with like gold coins or some gold, and eventually,
Mm,
through a series of really bad trades, he
yeah.
ends up with just worthless nothings,
Wow.
worthlessness, and which he
That's
then
good.
looks. Here's the key. Ratzinger says, and he then looks at it, realizes, eh, and throws it away.
Yeah. Right.
So that
Right.
you're spot on, Kale. This is the
Yeah.
essence of modernity. We've gradually engaged in a set of trades
Right.
where we've dumbed down our patrimony, our spiritual patrimony, into nothingness, at which point we look at it and go, eh,
Yeah.
and we yeah,
Boy,
throw it
that's
away.
powerful. That's really powerful,
We
right? Because these series of trades are real, and we don't even know it, right? I mean, the key component is that we think we're doing what we're supposed to do, right? And look, Larry,
yeah,
you and I have to live in the world. We have to feed our families. We've got to do all the stuff. So, you and I are, even though I know what we're saying might come across as being maybe overly romantic, but I don't think it is. I actually think it's quite sober, right? That what we do in these series of trade-offs, which are really trade downs, I like what you're saying here,
yeah,
is that we are losing the sort of the full um, power and agency of a creature made in the image and likeness of God. One of the things that Rod Dreher is uh, he often quotes when he gives a talk or whatnot is that he's quoting Yuval Noah Harari, and he says what we've done in modernity is we have exchanged um, power, or we have replaced meaning for power, right? So that we spend our daily bread on the amassing of power and agency vis-a-vis technology, et cetera. And what we pay for that with is that which we should pay attention to, which is ultimately meaning. And there's a necessary trade-off there, that winds up sort of spending down your abilities, to see and to hear, right? But you think what you're doing is actually optimizing. And so there's a fascinating kind of bait and switch going on. We might even call it a temptation, Larry. you know,
yeah, yeah,
um, which kind
yeah,
of gets at the heart of what we're calling the diabolical, the splitting up. It's like, yeah, you can certainly gain some power. Nobody's going to argue with you on that score. But what does it cost you to amass that kind of power? And so we have all kinds of
yeah,
modern parables that would speak to this kind of condition. What if you're the kind of person that pursues with a sort of monomaniacal zeal the amassing of wealth? What if you are someone who spends all of your attention with the zeal toward optimizing for fame, or optimizing for victory, or all of these sorts of things? What happens? Now, of course, none of those things are bad in and of themselves, really, right? The problem is that it's a disordering of ultimates for penultimates, as you like to say.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important. God, that's so well said. and we're sort of, okay, we've been at this a long time, but I just, there's
We
just
always
so
do this, Larry. We always do this.
endlessly fascinating. But
Yeah.
when I say it should cost us something to, you mentioned we're not just romantics, we're onto something here. But it's also, that's an interesting caveat though, because once again, in avoiding cosplaying and simply
Hmm.
trying to invest in something that costs rather than being a detached watcher,
Hmm.
it's important to emphasize in terms of the enchantment created
Hmm.
by our self-investment in something, that it not run the risk, not run the danger of simply becoming a kind of romanticism,
Hmm.
simply an adjunct to the therapeutic self. This
Right.
is this is
Right.
key. Therefore, this is why I really love the spirituality of Dorothy Day. One of the things the Jesuits do well is the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, by the way.
Hmm. Totally.
And
Yeah.
and I think there's something to be said for, okay, pilgrimages, great. All kinds of vision quest, heroic, let's climb this mountain, great. But there's also something in the Gospels that reminds us that there's nothing more energizing,
Hmm.
spiritually
Hmm.
uplifting than the kenotic descent of the self into abnegation through
Wow.
service to the poor, through engagement with the poor, with the destitute, with, well, my turning point wasn't, you know, Rome or study abroad. My turning point came as a seminarian when I spent time in the Dominican Republic learning. My diocese sent me there to learn Spanish,
Yeah.
to do the Hispanic ministry back home, and I lived with a poverty-stricken family when I was down there. I mean, I was a 23, 24-year-old skinny little bookish academic nerd from hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but this, you talk about cost. It can't, in other words, the cross that we must bear in order to invest ourselves kenotically, in order to re-enchant ourselves properly, cannot be self-chosen, tiny little manageable crosses.
Hmm.
They simply become part of the toolbox of the therapeutic self. These The cross has to really impinge. And when my first month in the Dominican Republic, I wanted to hop on a plane and come home
Course.
every day.
Get me out
I
of
mean,
here, right? Yeah.
I developed illnesses. I had a rash on my rear end that
Oh,
became
jeez.
a
Yeah.
fungus raised up. I thought I was going to
Yeah.
declare myself as a plant in customs when I went home.
Did you bring anything home with you? Well, we have to talk.
Yeah, we have to talk.
Actually,
It's
I did bring
attached to
home
me.
something that's growing. I don't like
Yeah,
this, but you know.
it's a little something something that I don't want to talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
But the point is, by the end of my time there, I was an utterly transformed human
Mhm.
being. I
Well,
went
because
from,
you're stripped of your normal. You're
oh
stripped of your
God,
normal.
yes. I didn't want to leave. I
Mm,
contemplated becoming a missionary to go
mm,
back there to
mhm,
live with the people. I finally learned enough Spanish to communicate with people.
mhm.
I grew accustomed to the not having any hot water
Yeah.
or clean
Wow.
water, and
Yeah.
and I'm not advocating that everybody go out and get a
Yeah.
rash
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on their petard and drink bad water. What I'm saying is, when I say to re-enchant ourselves properly in a Christian thing, we're talking about the pastoral need of the church to
Yeah.
re-innovate people. It's got to cost us in very deeply meaningful ways, not ways that are managed. If they're managed
Right.
crosses,
Right.
they're still part of the cosplaying.
Right. And so you notice what happens, when the, what is the modern solution to that? Well, the modern solution is to eradicate poverty. Fine. You're not going to get an argument from me that we need more poverty, right? But what the modern will tell you is that those poor people that you lived with and served while you were a missionary seminarian in the Dominican Republic, right, is that those people could see, right? And you know this, right? They could see. For them, recognize the supernatural reality of life was easy peasy, no problem, right? They look at us and be like, "Oh, those poor first world people, they can't even see the truth of things." Right. And so what is the snooty modern? I can count myself amongst them from time to time. What is the snooty modern? Well, those are these poor backwards people. They're ignorant. They don't know what's real. When the irony of the situation is that's actually an inverted reality, right? It is they who can see because they're not confounded with the
That's
spells of
right.
modernity. They
That's right.
they they might deal with real spells, right? Real demonic type things
Oh,
that
and they
that
do.
right, right. And so, so who's the poor person in this picture, right? And so my frustrations with the sort of the secularized, sort of flattened versions of the social justice cohort is that I admire their desire to get rid of poverty, of course, right? But
Yeah.
what always seems to accompany it is the kind of sneering contempt for a supernatural view of the world.
Absolutely. And I guarantee you, none of the poor people I lived with in the Dominican Republic wanted to be poor. They would have all loved
Yeah.
to move to America and live in a nice suburban neighborhood with a white picket fence. So we don't
Hmm.
want to romanticize
Right,
poverty.
right, right.
Nevertheless, you're absolutely correct. One of the, if you want to put it this way, one of the good side effects of poverty, well, there are two side effects
Yeah,
of poverty. The destitution level of poverty creates monsters. It creates
sure. We've seen it. Yeah,
horrible spiritual deformations. It's a
yeah,
horrible thing. But poverty, where people, the working poor,
yeah.
who are constantly hand to mouth and living in very, very bad conditions, one of the good effects of that is precisely an openness to the supernatural,
Hmm.
that to the enchantments of the world, of the spiritual world, and that is definitely something that we've lost. Nobody I knew in the Dominican Republic would have given up their attachment to spiritual things for the sake of wealth. I
Right.
don't think so. I mean, most of
Right.
them would.
To misquote Wordsworth here, we have given away our chance. He said, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers, a sordid boon. Right. It's a bad exchange. It's a bad gift. Right. That we've given
That's
away
it,
our
man.
our
That's
ability to
bad.
see this. So now, so to get back to the sort of the Uber topic here, we're talking about this notion of a disenchanted frame. We've been talking about whether even is such a thing as disenchantment. I think both of us would agree. Well, actually, no, there's not really such a thing as disenchantment. So then, to what do we now turn to for enchantment? I know some people get obsessed with movies. I know some people get obsessed with things that are much, much worse. We've already talked about gambling and pornography and
Drugs.
booze and drugs and all those kinds of things, right? But you and I are both sensing that there's this sort of strange emergence of both neo-paganism and as well as a kind of neo sci-fi-ism, which is a kind of
Okay.
the
Yes.
obsessions with aliens and all of that. And just to put my cards on the table, I don't know what's exactly going on. Okay, so I'm not in my conversation here with you, Larry, right now. I'm not going to say, are you a believer or not? Do you think this stuff is real or not? Is it, whatever it is, but what I am seeing is the very clear emergence of a kind of new ontology of the world, which has to do with some strange combination of paganism and sci-fi
Oh no.
aliens from an
Yeah.
interplanetary way.
I'm glad we talked before we went on the air about wanting to get into this topic,
Yeah.
and we were going long, but I was still hoping that we
Well, we'll
could
just
talk
do a
about
taste.
this.
We'll do a taste of it.
Yeah, and maybe we could have a follow-up show
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, I'm actually now a part of a group of mainly Catholics, but other Protestants as well, a group of scholars, theologians, academics, philosophers involved in this discussion.
I think it's
Uh,
important. I
we
think it's
might even
important, Larry.
we might even have a conference in Rome near the
Right.
Vatican to draw
Right.
in Vatican personnel to talk about this, because I think I was at a conference at Notre Dame last fall where I saw a screening of a film by Robert Duncan, who's
It's
you
a
know
really good film. I've seen
you
it. It's
you've
really
seen
good.
it,
Yeah.
excellent film. Jonathan Pagone.
Pajot's in it. Pajot's
Peugeot,
in it.
Peugeot, he was there and he was actually at the conference. He was one of the
Yeah.
speakers.
Yeah.
And so this is, in other words, this phenomena has moved from fringe, ha ha ha, you believe in
Totally.
UFOs,
Totally.
into the mainstream, almost the mainstream of disc people people are now taking it seriously. One of the things I think is very, very important to understand is the change in nomenclature is not by chance. We used to talk about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, but notice how now the lingo, the nomenclature is UAP,
Right.
unidentified anomalous phenomenon.
Phenomena. Yeah. Right. Well, what
So
do you make of that?
that's a
I have
broad
my sort of
category.
I have my sort of take on that, but what do you make of
Well, what
that
I
change?
take on that is that the acknowledgement that the idea that we're being visited in physical spacecraft by alien beings, biological entities
Hmm.
from another star system, is simply one theory among many.
Sure.
That there are other theories out there floated by reputable
Yeah.
people saying, well, maybe they're just interdimensional beings.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not coming from distant star systems. Maybe they're strange beings that live in other dimensions that what we've been talking about that we can't
Yeah.
see, that we
Right.
can't sense, but they have the ability to break into our dimension even if we can't break into theirs. So I think that's one of the reasons why the UAP nomenclature has now emerged. You get scholars like Diane Pozolka, whose books
Hmm.
I don't necessarily recommend because theologically I think she's a little strange.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
I've read them both. So go ahead.
okay, yeah, I have
Yeah.
both of her
Yeah.
books here.
Yeah.
What are they called? I can't remember the names now.
One is called American Cosmic, which was the first one, and the second one is called Encounters.
Yes, yes, and there's another book by a guy named Redfern. I can't remember the
Oh yeah,
name
what's
of
the
it.
name of that one? Yeah.
Nick Redfern.
Mhm.
That's very, very makes a very similar point, and their point is that we're dealing with, in a sense, we're not dealing with ETs, and so cards on the table. I believe that this is that these that UAPs represent, yes, interdimensional beings. I think they represent spiritual beings. I think we're dealing with the angelic and the demonic. That's what I
Mhm.
think we're dealing with
Mhm.
in the UAP phenomenon. And people say, well, what about the physical traces and the fact that well, the spiritual world is capable of manifesting as physical.
Yeah, to me, I agree. I don't know where I am exactly yet, but I probably cheat toward that, honestly.
Well,
But
I'll interrupt you. I
yeah,
don't hold
yeah.
to that dogmatically.
Yeah,
It
no,
would be
I know,
simply
I
my
know.
theory of choice.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think that's an important little caveat. So good. But we know we know that spiritual beings know how to manipulate the material universe, right?
Yes.
And I go no further than the Gospels to show that the possessed man, I believe it's in Luke's Gospel. I should have this at the ready. I apologize to my audience, I don't have it. But the possessed man, when he is freed from his possession by Jesus, his body crumples. It goes
Oh
back
yeah.
to its sort of proper form, right? So that to me it's not a stretch at all to understand that that spirits can interact and manipulate the physical world. But I think the larger point to me, my takeaway from Pasulka, is she's correctly recognizing this as the emergence of a new religion. Right. And, she's sort of playing the agnostic game, which is fine. She's a scholar of religion. She's allowed to do that. It's fine. I don't get my knickers in a
Yeah.
twist about that at all. But clearly, and the reason why I don't grimace at the change from UFO to UAP is really the focus on that phenomenon, right? There's a phenomena going on right now for which we have very little frame to make sense out of. And therefore, she is, I think, correctly taking kind of pre-modern frames to try to make some
Yes.
kind of sense of this. And so I think that's
Yes. Yes.
important. I think that's important. And the so they are phenomena, right? And we have to deal with them as phenomena. Now, my concern here is we're in a very precarious situation here with the church, right? Because as the church has um, uh, 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 jettisoned its supernatural sensibilities, we'll call them that.
Yeah.
As she has jettisoned her supernatural sensibilities, we have concurrently going on phenomena for which she either ignores, the church largely understood, to which she either ignores or simply pretends is not there. And this is really dangerous for people because what are you going to do? I'm just making stuff up here. What are you going to do if you have an experience? How are you going to file that? How are you going to make sense out of these kinds of things? And as she says in one of her talks or whatever, she says, the medieval peasant is much more prepared to deal with what is seeming to manifest itself, to emerge, to show itself, than is the rank and file modern, like any of us, any of
That's
our
because
friends.
the medieval had a porous self and not a
Right.
buffered self.
Right. They
Uh,
already have a framework with which to deal with the unexplainable, this
yeah.
sort of these supernatural
But
elements.
you've really put your finger on why this topic interests me. This is not simply to me a bit of esoterica that
Right.
that tickles my ears, as St.
Which it
Paul
can
would
be
say,
for some people, which it
which
can be
it
for some people.
which it can
But
be.
but go
But
ahead.
to me, it represents when you do, and I wasn't really all that interested in it so much, 30, 40 years ago when the whole emphasis was simply on these are ETs, these are ETs, these are
Mhm.
ETs. Even though it fascinated me somewhat, that was not. But now lately, I've become very engrossed in the topic simply because of the emergence precisely of these alternative ideas as to what might be going on here. I think you're absolutely right. The church should not ignore this. The church should really do a dumpster dive into this phenomena because it's real. This is You can no longer simply ascribe it to nuthood, just the fringe element. I mean, the New Jersey drone incidents of last year prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that the public has a right to ask the question,
That's right.
what in the hell is going on
Right.
in our skies?
Right.
And President Trump, so they were all simply
Yeah.
FAA approved that bullshit.
Like, nah,
You know,
not buying
that
it. Not buying it.
that only adds to, so in other words, so here's my point. I'll get to it, which is that we are potentially witnessing a phenomenon that defies reduction to the old Enlightenment categories. It defies reduction to
Right.
reductionism. We are
Right.
potentially on the cusp of a consciousness changing, his history changing series of revelations or disclosures that could re enchant us in good ways. It can
Yep.
re enchant us also in very bad ways.
Right. Right.
And that's the key.
Right.
That's why the church
Right.
needs to be involved. All
She
right.
has to be.
Otherwise,
She
we're
has
going
to
to get
be.
re enchanted in bad ways.
Right.
And
Right.
if I am correct, this represents the intrusion into our lives of angelic and demonic spirits and maybe other entities as well. We have to
Hmm.
be discerning here as to what we're dealing with. We really do.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that motivates Diane Pazolka, despite her
Yeah.
sort of academic agnosticism.
Yeah.
I think she's concerned about this as well.
I think she is too, right? And and remember, two or three or five things can be true at once, right? And I think it's important when people are kind of, you know, there can be untold levels of governmental skullduggery. That can
Yes.
be true. That can be true. What can also be true is that there's a real sort of spiritual, interdimensional
Yes.
problem going on at the same time. And I think it's important, you can sort of say, well, I favor this or I favor that. And then there are again, it's a pretty complex reality. But don't get overly distracted by whatever the government is or is not doing. Clearly, the government knows way more than they're revealing. Maybe they have good reasons for that, Larry. I'm an adult. I can understand that there might be some things that need to be a secret. But there seems to be a lot of messiness, a lot of noise going on here, right? And so therefore, the reason why, again, I will repeat this, maybe as sort of a part of our sort of, landing the plane here, landing the UFO, I suppose, is that just as the church is getting rid of its ability to manage this moment because it stands atop the ultimate supernatural claims. Just as she's doing that, this other thing is emerging. And what I have learned in my time is that people are attracted by and to the supernatural, both in its dark
Yes.
manifestations and
Yes.
in its
Yes.
light manifestations. And so, if we are going to hoist our stagecoach to the horses of the eminent frame, I think that is a recipe for mass mass apostasy. Okay.
I agree.
And so
Uh,
we need to reclaim the magic, as it
well, it's
were.
oh, gosh, this is so true because here's the deal. Uh, People that follow, the UAP phenomenon know that in the past year, various whistleblowers have come out of the intelligence community, the Pentagon community, various people that worked for subcontractors, the American, like David Grush, a guy named
Yep,
David
yep,
Grush,
yep.
testified before Congress. Now, what's interesting about that is this: what many of these whistleblowers are now saying, which is why it's very, very important to understand, is that the Pentagon and CIA and others were deliberately recruiting people with what he called psionic abilities,
Yep. Right.
psyops, where
Yep.
where you could train the human mind to communicate telepathically with the orbs,
Mhm.
and actually then get them to react. Now,
Right.
anybody listening to me go, man, Chap's gone off the deep end.
Crazy.
He's
Yeah, yeah.
talking about
It's all on
telepathically.
paper. I mean, this is documented
I'm
stuff.
just
Yeah.
repeating what a high
Yeah.
level,
Right.
guy whistleblower said before Congress, and that others have come forward to corroborate it. And it goes along with what people like Diane Pazolka and others have been talking about. Even a charlatan like Stephen Greer has talked about this for
Right.
many, many
Right.
years,
Right.
and I think he is a charlatan who's
Same. 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 Same.
a huckster. But
Yep.
nevertheless, this idea, that we can, telepathically engage. Now, this is both exciting because it proves maybe the non-locality of
Right.
mind,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
it's
Right.
also
Right.
dangerous as rah,
Yeah. I know.
because
I know.
who are we dealing with? And if
Right.
once again, you could be dealing with very dark forces, and
Right.
which is why the church needs to get involved here.
Absolutely. I mean, really, I mean, I cannot stress this enough. And I get frustrated because some people have accused me like, oh, Kale's like going down some weird rabbit hole. And I'm like, no, like, dude, I'm a normal guy. Like I really am. Like but I'm telling you it's important, and well, no, look, I work with young people. Like
Yeah,
I know what they're like, basically, right? And of course, particularly and individually as well. But you know, if you think that if you think that the church can sit this one out and play synodal games, you are writing the recipe for the deepest kind of irrelevance I can possibly imagine. And to me, that is a sin. Okay,
yeah,
Larry, a
yeah.
capital
Oh, absolutely.
SIN sin. That means you are not ministering to the people that the good Lord has seen fit to put on in front of you. And
Yeah,
dismissing it as kookery is not good enough right now. It's not good enough, right? Because
yeah, yeah.
you know, bad stuff
Well,
could be on the horizon if we don't take this
and
seriously.
it raises the question of who are the real kooks.
Right,
What's the
right,
real kookery? The
right.
fact is that the world of illusions we live in, the disenchantment creates, as Rod Dreher, live not by lies. Disenchantment
Mhm.
actually creates a culture of lies,
That's right. That's right.
of deep deception, and so we tend to equate the kooks with people that are involved in truth seeking,
Right.
and
Right.
so
And you,
who are the real kooks?
well, right. And you and I both know that it is strangely one of the ways that God has talked to his people throughout time is oftentimes that person that you would run screaming from at a cocktail party, right? The kook. And I'm
Yeah,
serious about this, right?
yeah,
We've all have our normalcy bias. We'd all prefer that, but there's just something about the tapped person that, you and I have enough experience to know that a lot of times that tapped person actually is on to something. Right. And so,
yeah.
so I want the audience, and maybe we'll leave it here. Dinner calls, Larry. I'm sorry, but I have to go
Me
make
too.
dinner. I have to go make dinner, as a matter of fact. But no, the word that I want the audience to hear, and you uttered it, not even a minute ago, deception. Okay. We have to have eyes wide open, ears wide open, our senses wide open, because deception is the name of the game. We know that that's the enemy's playbook, so I don't want to get sort of too, but be wary of deception. And deception is not the same as ignoring. Right, right. In other words,
Yeah, yeah,
in other words, the safety mechanism or the defense against deception is not to ignore and hope that the problem goes away.
Amen. And let's
Yeah,
leave it at that. We both have
yeah.
to go do dinner now. What a fascinating conversation, Kale. Damn, I love talking to you,
That's the
man.
best. It's the best.
We,
I'm
we,
telling you.
we are brothers from a different mother.
Yeah, yeah,
I just got to say that. So yes, we
yeah.
both have to run, but let's definitely do a follow-up episode to this one because there are
Right.
just so many more things actually to talk about that are related to this topic, and people are really interested in it. And not only that, it's a very important topic,
Yeah.
to know
Word.
that the really real is not the world of Dollar General and Tim Horton.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
That's right. No, that's
As
right. That's right.
as ubiquitous and ordinary as those things are, that's the
That's right.
deception. That's not the really
Amen.
world. All right. All right. Thank you,
Thank you,
Kale,
Larry.
so much.
Thank
And
you.
thanks everybody
Yeah.
for listening. Bye now.